Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to Podio Commentary. And today we're going to be discussing the newest release over on Shudder.com, Suitable Flesh. Now, this movie came out last year, premiered, I believe, at Tribeca before being released on PVOD right around the Halloween season. But it finally made its way to Shudder, to streaming just this last week. And a lot of people have been talking about it now that they are finally able to watch it with their Shudder subscription. And listen, I am not like the biggest horror movie watcher. I like them. I want to get into watching more of them. So like my friend tossed me his password to watch this movie. I do need to go and get my own Shudder subscription because they have a lot of content on there that I want to see. So I really need to dive on it. This movie caught my interest for predominantly one reason, and well, two reasons really. One is I heard it's based on an H.P. Lovecraft short story titled The Thing on the Doorstep. I always find H.P. Lovecraft to be wildly engaging, wildly entertaining. And just the other day, while I was at work, I had time to kill, and I started just listening to all of these like H.P. Lovecraft explained videos trying to get a solid understanding of the mythos of like Cthulhu, like Lovecraftian horror, like the characters, the world. I'm big into that kind of stuff. So when I caught wind that this was based on something that came from H.P. Lovecraft, I was like, all right, cool. I'll give it a watch. And then I saw, oh, it's also got Heather Graham in it, and I'm never not going to want to watch something Roller Girl was in. Just saying. I'm a man. I've been a fan for a long time of Heather Graham, but it was also directed by Joe Lynch, which is a name that I've heard of, but I've never really had a lot of experience with. He's really known for like doing 2007's Wrong Turn 2 Dead End. He directed 2013's The Knights of Badassdom, which I've heard about, but I never actually saw when it came out. He also did 2017's Mayhem with Stephen Yeun and Samara Weaving, which I've heard good things about. And then, according to his wiki here, he did the 2019 Point Blank, which I first read that as Point Break, and I was like, oh, he did the Point Break remake? No, it's a movie with Anthony Mackie and Frank Grillo that pretty much went straight to video, which is kind of where Joe Lynch seems to live. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, in the age of streaming especially, there's nothing wrong with having movies be made specifically for streaming. The difference between a movie like this and let's say something like Rebel Moon over at Netflix is that that's a $200 million movie, and this movie's budget was probably somewhere around 10 to 15 million. I think I read something where someone had said like 12.6 million was the budget for this movie. And that absolutely makes a lot of sense. Like this is a low budget movie, and it's one that doesn't always like hide its flaws in regards to that. But I think where it might have some issues in regards to like the effects and how it utilizes those effects, when the story itself gets going, not going to lie, I actually thought it was pretty cool. So this is not like not a one-to-one recreation of the H.P. Lovecraft short story. This one takes the same characters, kind of mixes things up a little bit, gender bends here and there, references some of the key locations. You can find the short story breakdown on Wikipedia if you want to read it, or you can just go read it yourself as a short story. But it is really about Dr. Elizabeth Derby, played by Heather Graham, who is in a mental institution trying to tell her story to her best friend, Daniela Upton, about what's been happening to her, especially in regards to this kid who came into her psychiatrist's office named Asa Waite, who enthralled her in ways that she never experienced, never felt, and that kind of took her down a very dark and twisted pathway. And that's, and of course you have to, you have to remove the head, you have to destroy the brain, because they say that in the beginning and you don't quite know exactly what they're getting at. Like you're like, oh, maybe it's a zombie thing, right? You don't really think demon or possession. You're thinking, oh, it's like a zombie, some kind of reanimated corpse sort of thing. And that's actually I think, a direct nod to the Reanimator movies, which this movie is kind of billing itself as a spiritual successor to, according to what I was reading about this film. I've never seen the Reanimator movie, so I can't quite tell you that. But I kind of like, just based on what I know about the Reanimator movies, I'm not too sure if I would really make that argument that is, those movies are based off of Lovecraft. This is based off of Lovecraft. You know, I think that's probably a fair amount of where the connection is. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, and that's great. I'd like to be proven wrong on these situations. And I will get around to watching the Reanimator films for Podio Commentary, obviously. But it's really, you know, interesting how they kind of set it up. Because then they obviously do the flashback. And it's just Dr. Derby in her office with the patient who, you know, is like a neurotic anti-smoker who's trying to quit, or a neurotic smoker who's trying to quit and everything else. And then all of a sudden, here comes Asa, and he's like, I need your help. You're the only one who can help me. I can't go back. My dad's trying to hurt me, you know? And she's like, I don't get it. She's trying to understand, you know, obviously they're trying to get the story going. And then he gets a phone call. He answers it. The dad says something to him on the phone, and then he goes into this body transformation, because the entire concept of this movie is it's body horror, right? It's body transformation, body horror, but it's body horror that's being done in like a weird, like it's weird effects in regards to the editing, because they don't have the budget to like really kind of showcase the body transforming. So they just use like the sound effects of like knuckles cracking or bones breaking. And it just keeps showing like the hand, right? Like the hand keeps kind of twisting, and then they use the sound effects, and that's like, oh, the transformation's happening, folks. Everyone get ready. The transformation's happening. And of course the camera like shakes and the image shakes and it's all fuzzy and crazy and everything. And at first I was like, okay, like it went on a little bit too long at first. I get it. They're trying to establish it, so later on they can kind of, you know, like make their way through it without really having to do that, you know, with like show it all again. But then it's clearly not Asa. It's clearly somebody else. Is it the dad? We don't know. Is it a possession? We don't know. Something was said on the phone that made him freak out a little bit. My thought was like, oh, is this kind of like the Cell or Cell, whatever it was, the Stephen King story about, you know, people on their cell phones when a signal hits and it just kind of scrambles their brains? Or, you know, is it kind of like maybe even what's it called, like Kingsman Secret Service, where like the cell phones emit a signal that cause people to go crazy? It's we don't know yet. We don't know, right? But then like he's this like kind of like dark, mysterious guy, you know, he's like confident, and he goes over and he's just like getting real close, and he's like, you know, he's scaring her. You can tell she's like, oh my God, right? But then it gets like really erotic. You know, he like grabs her vagina, like he just freaking commits sexual assault right there, you know, and she's like, like you like turned on by it. So then she goes home afterward, because he takes off. So she goes home, and then like her husband there, and her husband is played by Johnathon Schaech, or Schaech. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is an actor I haven't seen in anything since like 1997's Welcome to Whoop Whoop, which is a phenomenally good movie. If you haven't seen it, I don't know. You can't stream it right now. I went looking for it. I'll have to find a way to watch it again, because it's a really fun Australian comedy that came out in the late 90s. So he's the husband. He's Eddie. You know, we don't know what he does. He spends half the movie with his shirt off, like to showcase, like, I got the bond and I got the lady. I mean, the idea behind it is they're trying to showcase that like they're, you know, double income, no kids. They're dinks. Right. They're in like their late 40s, early 50s, so on and so forth, you know, and it's like they have a pretty idyllic life. They have a pretty safe life. They have a pretty standard life, a good life, you know, so much so that like the sex is kind of boring, at least, you know, at first. Like in the one of the most awkward starts of a sex scene I've ever seen in a movie is like he's like kissing on her and she's kind of like not into it, and then he's humping, you know, he's doing the motions, and she's just got this like blank stare on her face. And I think like I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't know what's happening here. Like, I'm not too sure. But then she like sees Asa's like face in the fan. And then she imagines that like Asa's now on top of her. And then after that, she just goes like buck wild, and give it up to Heather Graham to really to really bring it on this one. Absolutely. But I was just laughing because I'm like this kid's like 17, 18 years old, it seems like, and she just met him and like he graped her essentially. And, partial grape. And she like then is turned on by it and then just like, has the best orgasm of her life sort of thing in that moment. And so then like right afterward, like, she's kind of wondering if she's going to see him again. He calls her, says like where he's at, needs help. She runs over there to go and see, no, she goes over there to see the dad. That's right. And this is played by Bruce Davison, who, by the way, he did great. Bruce Davison did great as like the dad who's got like cancer and all these heart problems and his body is failing him, but he's clearly the possessed one. But we don't know anything about that. We're not too sure what's going on. We're not too sure what's happening. We just know that he is the possessed one and they have an interaction. And he ends up like cutting her, getting her blood on his knife, which then falls on a spell book, showing like the elder gods. So you see what appears to be a Cthulhu-esque type monster. And then the pages of the book start like sucking up the blood. So now we're like, okay, now we know we're in this new space. Now we know we're in this new spot where there, now the spell is going to happen. There's going to be body takeover, things along those lines. Then she ends up going back over there later on when Asa calls. And this is when we find out that like the entity, the possession, all he has to do is utter a phrase and it turns the person into the other person, like the body transfer happens. Now, while I'm watching this play out in this scene, and it's a good scene, I'll fully admit it's a good scene. What I kept going back to was the 1997 or 1998 Denzel Washington, John Goodman thriller Fallen, which was about a fallen angel or a demon who could possess people based upon touch. And this was very, very, very similar to that. Nowhere near as good as Fallen, but similar nonetheless. So as the dad basically dies after doing the body transformation, right? Like, Asa is now, horny. And he starts coming on to Heather Graham's character. And like, she's just all like, she sits back, on the desk as he's getting closer and closer. And, makes like some terrible dialogue in this part of the scene where, like something about like, like, why don't you come to my office? And he's like, I'll come in your office sort of thing. I'll whatever. All this like really overt sexualization meant to kind of showcase this erotic thriller side of it. But it comes across as like not even good camp. It's just bad dialogue and it's kind of cringe to watch. But then again, but at this point now they actually have sex. It's like she just immediately like gives into it and they have sex. And while they're having sex, he says the same phrase to her because, he's already cut her. So he can then transfer himself into her body. And they do this mid-coitus. And it's the way that it's like, again, they have a limited budget. They can only show so much. So they do this with a lot of like fancy camera tricks and just a lot of the editing and flashy and everything else. And it got to be a little, again, it's just like, that to me kind of always took me out of those scenes because it just felt like it was like too much. Like I know they're trying to compensate for not having the budget, but I felt they could have probably found a better way to do it because then it's a quick possession and then a body, transfer back. And then we find out that there's only really 3 times that the transference can happen before it's permanent. So after this whole thing happens, like the body of the dad's right there. I mean, real Asa is in the body of the dad. He wakes up. And he, he's trying to like get help. And so then, other Asa pulls out the knife and then just decapitates him right there in front of Heather Graham. And it's like, this scene is again, so kind of corny. And it just like, it is like, it's a lot of blood, a lot of sound effects, but it's still just kind of like, okay, cause then she like runs out of the house cause it catches on fire as well. And she gets in the car and she drives home. She drives home. She tells her husband, like, oh no, she goes and sees Daniela Upton to tell Danielle what's going on. Danielle kind of goes, whatever. Like, is it, maybe you're just like having guilt because you had feelings, or you had guilt because you slept with this guy. And, let me get you a fresh shirt because you got some blood on you, right? Not even like, where'd the blood come from? So then she goes home and then she just tells her husband flat out they had sex, which, by the way, like, I have to give credit to that, because she was really upfront about it right away. Like, the guilt was there. She didn't try to hide it. Usually in these scenarios, like, they would try to hide it till something would force the information out, right? Force it out in order to have the conflict. But because this movie was also only like an hour and 38 minutes, they didn't really have a lot of time to stretch out the drama. They needed to get back to the body horror. They needed to get back to the overall story. So she tells her husband, and then he's like, I can't even look at you. And then she leaves, and then she goes back to the office, and she's kind of hiding out there for a couple days. And then she's like, no, I'm going to go home and I'm going to make it work. I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to do anything I have to do to save my marriage. So she goes home, and then she goes and takes a shower. And this part I thought was actually really, really cool. So then it cuts over to Asa, who is now like underneath the house in like the basement, and he handcuffs himself to a pole. And I'm thinking, like, why is he going to handcuff himself to a pole? Like, what's he doing? And then I'm like, oh, he's going to transfer into her and make sure like she can't leave, but then he'll be in her body. And then like, he's going to like kill her husband or something like that. Like, that's where my mind immediately goes. And I was like, ooh, this is now getting kind of good. And that's what he does. He calls her on the phone and he says the line, and they do the transfer. Okay. So this is, by the way, I just want to point this out. This is, by the way, the second time in the movie where them saying the phrase over the phone is what instigates the transference. Now keep that in mind for later, because they kind of destroy their own world logic. And I know why they did it, but it just felt very frustrating. So now we get to the part of the movie where, Heather Graham is possessed. And so she puts on the full of the persona, like she's now like in a female body, or the demons in now a female body, had never been there. So she's like doing like self-exploration and like some masturbation and stuff. And then she goes down and starts drinking. The husband comes home. He wants to work on the marriage. He's still very upset. She doesn't know who he is. And we don't know if she's going to kill him because like she's got a knife there. But she seduces him because the guy just wants his wife. He just wants his wife, and she's this different like person. And she's like, oh, let's just be stranger. And he's like, oh, okay, a little role play thing going on here. And they really stretch the scene out, but they do it really well, I think. Like he sits down, like she straddles him, she pulls out the knife, she cuts off his boxers, and she takes like her robe and she wraps the freaking the robe from the robe around his neck, as they start having sex. And I'm like, I've seen this in like a porno before. Like, that dude's gonna die, like, oh, it wasn't a porno, it was like a Skinamax HBO movie from like way back in the 90s. And like, that's kind of what you're anticipating, is like they start having sex and it's like hardcore rough sex and shit. And then the camera just starts doing this like 360 spin to showcase the intensity of the moment. And his head is like rocking back and forth. And it's like, you can tell she's gripping tighter on that rope. So you don't know if he's getting choked out. And like the way that you're thinking it's going to happen, because this movie already only has one death in the film, like we're like an hour in, you would figure there would be more, right? Like he would die. No, they actually get you on it where he doesn't die because she didn't want to kill him. Like, just, that was the thing with the weird thing about the possession, is like, he was just living body to body to body to body and experiencing power through those bodies, but never felt like he needed to kill. Like, he wasn't a serial killer. He would kill, but it was like, it was about the experience, which is kind of weird. Because at the same time, you've got, you've got Elizabeth in Ace's body in the basement. And this is where we get like the one real like Lovecraftian thing. Like she uses a light and she looks over and you see like this like symbol, this like, and then there's like an octopus god that's like right there, like like you don't know what it is. Like, is he the octopus? Is that what it is? Like, there's no explanation as to why there's an octopus that's there. Is it meant to be a Cthulhu-esque type thing? We don't spend any time with it to understand what it is. It's like an Easter egg. If you just like, you blink, you'll miss it sort of thing. But then she gets, uses a cell phone, calls in Daniela. Daniela comes on over. They have a conversation. Daniela kind of gets the vibe that like this actually is Elizabeth. But then the switch happens back and it's Asa. And again, Asa's like kind of like flaunting it a little bit. He's taunting her a little bit, like plays it off like, oh, everything we've done is consensual. This is just role play, yada, 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 yada. He's telling her, get the fuck out the house, that kind of shit. Never mind, like whatever that bloody, smelly corpse is that's in the corner that was clearly stinking, because when Elizabeth was there in the body, she could smell it. And that was how we knew that it was there. And that was completely overlooked. Okay, sake of moving the plot along, sort of thing. So then, Daniela leaves. All right. And then it's like, whatever, Elizabeth ends up realizing that she only has one more communication with the demon before the body transformation is horrible. We know that the demon has cut up Edward, the husband. So if he wanted to possess him, he would have a vessel to do so. So she's like, go away. I will kill myself if I need to. Just get out of here. Please, 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 please. Okay, so the husband leaves. So then she goes back to her office, kind of like to bait Asa to show up. She does bait Asa to show up. Asa then tells her, like, you're going to have to kill me. That's what's going to happen. He puts the knife there, basically taunting her to do it. She tries to hypnotize him, because that's something she was doing at the beginning of the movie as a psychiatrist. So she attempts to hypnotize him to find out more information. Like, he's tired. He's been doing this for thousands of years. He doesn't know when he was born. He doesn't know if he was born a male or a female. He thinks he was born a male. It doesn't really matter at this point. And that was actually a really intriguing conversation, because I thought, like, all right, cool. We're getting some depth here. We're getting some lore about just what this thing is. Because otherwise there's been nothing really. And then she takes the shot, stabs him in the face or in the head. He doesn't die. She shoves him out the window. He falls like 3-4 stories down to the parking lot. You think he's dead. She goes to leave. He tries to get back up. She gets in her car. This scene was great. This is my favorite part of the whole damn movie. It's this shot from inside the car. She is just like, reversing back and like just ramming her car into his head. And we see all of it from the perspective of the reverse backup camera. And I thought that was so inventive. I thought that was so good, so funny. That was the camp that the movie was needing, because otherwise it was kind of like bad dialogue, decent acting, some weird editing, but this scene was like really where it was at. I thought this scene was pretty great. And then that's not enough. He's still trying to speak. He's still trying to say the words to her. So she starts just like cutting up his freaking windpipe, trying to decapitate him. Cops show up, grab her, throw her in a mental institution. That catches up to current present day, where she's trying to explain it all to Daniela. Daniela then is like, believes her, goes to want to, kill, destroy the body. The body now wakes up again, reanimates from inside the morgue, says the words, causes the transformation. Here's the thing though. He says the words out loud, casts the spell, if you will. She doesn't hear it. She's not in the room. And yet the transference happens. No other time in the movie had that been a thing. No other time in the movie had the person who had been taken over, possessed, had not been in the room within earshot, on the phone, I said twice now, or anything else. So what that leads me to believe is that they just needed to get from point A to point B to get to the end. So at this point, you've got Asa is in Elizabeth's body. Elizabeth is in Asa's body, and she's trying to crawl her way out, like the mangled corpse of this boy, that she's trying to get out there to get help and whatever. And eventually they end up fighting, and like this would be Asa and Daniela end up fighting. They break out into the hallway. There's a security guard there. He named Mac. He drops the gun. Daniela grabs it, and she's gonna like trying to, gonna kill him or gonna kill. She's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Elizabeth is still alive in the body at this point in time, and just says, kill me, whatever. And then she does. She destroys the brain. So then Elizabeth is gone. So now it's just Daniela, and it's Asa in Daniela's body, and they fight. And he ends up doing the transformation yet again. And then, they fight again. Mac gets killed. And then they're in the final embrace, and he does the transformation again, and you don't quite know which one is going to be which. I mean, and then of course you get to the end of the movie, and Daniela is consoling Edward, right? Calls him Eddie, so that's the first indication that it's not actually Daniela. And then goes to smoke the vape. Vape doesn't work. Pulls out a hand rolled cigarette. Now we know that Daniela is really Asa in another body, while the Daniela is in Elizabeth's body, locked away in a padded cell in a straitjacket because of the murders and everything else that we know about. And that's where the movie ends. And it's like, it's a fine movie for like, streaming. It's a fine movie for that kind of stuff. I think it's a little bit overrated from like some of the critical results that I've seen. Like, it's definitely like a one-time watch, in my opinion. It's not a bad movie, but it's a movie called Suitable Flesh. And they don't even really like it's based on on Lovecraftian, and I'm pretty sure they have to very much like tiptoe around certain things in order to not have to pay a licensing fee to talk, to mention Cthulhu or any specific things. But you figure they would have done a bit more to at least, like, again, tiptoe around the mythos to explain just what this thing is. And I give credit to the actors. I thought they all brought a lot to the role. I thought they did really well for this low budget movie. There were some inventive moments, like I said, with the car backing up and the decapitation stuff was pretty cool. But at the end of it, it was just kind of like, it doesn't necessarily know entirely what it wants to be. And I don't know if that's Joe Lynch with the script. I don't know if that's just restrictions with the budget. But I will say that Heather Graham and Barbara Crampton did do a great job. The kid who played Asa did a good job. Like, your main leads in the movie conveyed enough for the back half of the story to be compelling enough to get to the end. But it was also very largely predictable in many ways. And it's like, I was hoping, there were things I was predicting that didn't come true. But there's other things as I was watching, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I can kind of see what's happening here. That they are trying to, like, they're following formula because they don't really have the opportunity, I think, they kind of have to for something like this. But those are just my thoughts. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this. If you saw the movie, let me know. Follow me on Twitter at Podio Commentary. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave a comment below, recommend me a new movie to watch. And if you haven't already, for anywhere you get your podcasts, follow, leave a review. And if you want to sponsor an episode, you can do that as well. Hit me up and I'll watch a movie you want me to watch and I'll talk about it. But until next time, guys, have yourself a great day. Thank you very much for listening, and go watch a new movie you haven't seen. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.